everybody, and welcome to the Something Something podcast. My name is Eric Kasloff, and with me, as always, is Larry Sands. How's it going, Larry?
It's hot. It's hot. It's 100 and some every day. But it's good. It's great, you know, getting
So,
stuff
are
done
you
in the house.
basically playing hot child in the city 24 hours a day?
Yes. Uh,
Where
oh,
are you, Larry, that it's 100 degrees? I'm in LA and it's not 100 degrees.
I'm in Texas and here in San Antonio, and Eric is in
New Jersey.
not Lodi. Where?
Elmwood
Elmwood
Park, New
Park.
Jersey now.
Elmwood Park, New Jersey, and it's really hot. And I heard that like maybe a couple days ago, it was pretty hot in LA.
Yeah. Last week we had gone down to Palm Springs where it was, I mean, crazy hot. If you want to visit a resort in Palm Springs and you want it to be empty, go right about now. I think it was 115 degrees Fahrenheit the first day we got down there.
Holy
But
cow.
the
Wow.
resort had a big indoor pool, and we had the resort staff to ourselves, so kind of fun. And then it cooled down to 110 the next day. Meanwhile, of course, we heard from our friends in Los Angeles that it was just as hot in LA when we were down there. So
You
it's
know
remote.
it's hot in LA.
It's a dry heat. My favorite expression is a dry heat because in England it never gets hot, but it rains all the time. So, and
Right.
when those few days when there's a heat that gets into like the 80s, the whole culture sort of breaks down. So
Oh man, that's great because you don't really think about that. Actually, yeah, everybody who you're hearing
Usually
on
we
the
oh,
do an
sorry.
introduction,
no,
but let's get right
no,
into our
no,
guests now.
no, no, on the other. Go
Let's
ahead.
just do a really quick update. Hillsborough Road is very close to being done. We
Yeah.
have met
Yep.
our composer, and yeah,
Yep.
I mean, it's going to be great. But Larry, introduce our guest.
Yes, Steven Bernstein. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You're not only a director, you're a writer, you're a podcaster, you're an author, and you started out as a cinematographer and director of photography, right? And before we got you on, before uh, we started the show, I was just talking to Eric, and I don't know if you realize it, and I don't know if people in the industry like realize the work that they do. And I know that's weird because, you know, and I don't know how it is for you, Stephen, or you, Eric, but every project you do, you work so hard and possibly so long that you're always on to the next project. And do you ever do you ever take a minute? I know this is a weird question, but do you ever take a minute to think about all the projects that you've done and what they
Oh,
mean to you?
it's a great question. Not only the projects, but just the moments in life that sort of passes by. It's there's a great psychological philosophic experiment where they show a very simple drawing that if you look at it once, you see a rabbit. You look at it again, you see a little pig. The drawing never changes, but our perception of that changes. So it's not
Mm,
so much the experiences we have, the objective one, it's our experiences of those experiences that is significant and our ability to be present for them. And I guess I'm a little bit disassociative, but in my conversations with other artists and thinkers and pretty much people, we're all a little bit disassociative because everything is mediated by our imaginations. Our memory
mm.
is not accurate. It's been filtered and mediated by our desire to remember things in certain ways or some predispositions we have. What we see as a future, of course, hasn't happened. So that's entirely our imagination. And even the experiential in the moment, again, we don't fully cognify, we're not fully present for. So everything is kind of partially imagined, even though we know there's a physical universe, there's evidence of it, we don't experiences of that. So to be able to hold on to it, to give it a substantive understanding or value is very, very difficult for me. I remember when my first book was published, which was just a textbook. And I got it, and they sent you a big box with all the books in it. And I held it in my hand, thinking, I've done something of substance. I was hugely depressed within 5 minutes because there's only one thing worse than not getting what you want, and that's getting what you
Getting
want
what
and
you want.
discovering that nothing has really changed. I remember being on the set of SWAT and 26 cameras, and we were crashing a three-quarter size model plane into Third Street Bridge, and hundreds of squibs blowing up with blood bags, and Samuel Jackson and Colin Farrell and stuntmen and all these camera crews. And if you guys know, Moscow lights are those giant
Yeah.
telescopic lights. I had about eight of them up. I was lighting most of East Los Angeles, all by myself, a crew of 150
Wow.
just for my unit, my action unit. And I can't say that I was joyful. I kind of empty. I felt like I was on a factory floor. So in our imagination, everything transmogrifies us. We get the partner we want. We achieve the thing that we want. We get money. We get fame, and we think it's going to alter us. And maybe
Mm.
nothing alters us. Maybe we're always inhabiting our own baggage for the rest of our lives and never really present for our experiences. So yeah, I'll go to a college campus and some kid will tell me how Monster or White Chicks changed his life, and
White.
I try to
Yeah,
respond
it's
to
a
it and think, oh yeah,
cliche.
I'm the guy who shot it, but I'm always kind of observing. I know there's a guy named Steve Bernstein who looks like me, lives in my skin, who did these things, but I'm never really wholly conscious that I've achieved anything at all, if that makes any sense.
I completely
It does.
understand. It's because when you're doing it, you don't realize what you're doing, if that makes sense. Pretty much what you said. And it does always take someone from the outside to point it out to you because when
Mhm.
you're dreaming of making movies, it's the dream. But when it becomes the job, you see the reality of it, the pressure of it. Everyone thinks a movie set is this fun, magical place. And it can be. There's moments on a movie set where it's, oh my God, this is magic. And everybody who works a 9 to 5 is about to kill me. But at a certain point, it does become an assembly line factory kind of a thing. Like, my favorite thing as a director is after a shot is perfect, to look at everybody and go, guys, that was amazing. We just need to do it 3 more times from different angles. Make sure you have the same passion while you do that. And then, it does get normalized, but in that where you do have to step away and look back to realize, yeah, you did something, but it's always hard to feel that you've done something.
It's also, I hear you completely, and but I'd also say, oddly, that I am happiest on film sets. I feel
Yeah.
that I have a function. I feel a special camaraderie, familiar connection to everybody else I'm working with. And as you know, Eric, and you know, Larry, the last day of a shoot is one of the saddest things you'll ever experience. The day after the last day
Yeah.
of the shoot, the sense of
Yeah.
quiet and emptiness. So it's hard to explain. I think working with people in common purpose, having that connection is a magical thing. But yes, you're also right in that you have to search out those experiences and make sure they remain magical. I went right from a SWAT to Monster, and Monster was one of the best experiences of my life, where we were all very, very connected, low budget, staying in horrible
Mm.
hotels, really up against it, under budget, over budgeted, under scheduled. Uh, we didn't have enough money, basically. We had too little time. And it didn't look like we were going to achieve anything when the film was finished because no one would buy that film. No one would buy the film about a woman serial killer because it was about a woman serial killer. And yet, flash forward 8 months later, it made $100 million and it won the Oscar. So,
Wow. Yeah.
and then Magic City, which was a TV show, which I thought was great,
I
just
liked it.
delighted every day that I was there. So it's a strange crucible, these experiences on film sets, the worst experiences and the best experiences, the Dickens thing, the best of times and the worst of times, but just a concentration of everything that life has to offer in a short period, I think is the way I experience it. But to your point, Larry, am I aware of what I've achieved? If I've achieved anything, I don't know. I always feel
Mm.
oddly disassociated from it.
Because
Yeah.
when I
Yeah. No,
looked
it's
through your
understandable.
IMDb, I was like, oh my God, half baked? Half Baked. That's a classic. And then a movie I teen horror movies is my favorite genre. It's like, whoa, he worked on Venom? Oh my God. And just going through everything. And it's weird because, Half Baked is such an important movie to me and my cousins. We quote it all the time together,
Well,
it
Eric, we now
really
know what you do in your recreational time besides
oh
watching
here's
movies.
oh
Yeah.
here's the weird thing. I have never done any type of drug in my life.
Of course you haven't, Eric, and we
No,
believe you. We
I
we
didn't
believe
start
you. I know,
smoking
Eric. We
cigars
believe
till I
you.
was 40
Yeah, we I and you watch Half Baked for the acting or for the cinematography?
because all of my cousins told me about it. And but then you look through your stuff, you're like, again, White Chicks. It's such a great movie that could never get made today.
No, that's
Yeah.
absolutely true. There's
No way in the world.
Yeah, we were all speaking about this. I shouldn't say I shouldn't say who was speaking about it, but some of the people that made it were talking about it, and some want to make it again, and some realize that the political landscape has changed to such a degree that we would be eviscerated by probably both sides of the political spectrum. Everyone would hate us.
Yeah,
So,
right.
which is a great achievement, not an easy thing to do, but it was so much fun to do, and of course the Terry Crews adventure. You meet a lot of awful people and you meet some great people. And Terry Crews is one of the good guys in the industry, genuinely
Wow.
Right.
good guy. And Terry was going nowhere when we first met him. He was a bouncer at the Comedy Store in Sunset.
Wow.
Wow.
And they flew him up there, and he was going to have essentially virtually a non-speaking, a very minor role. And we did the dance sequence first. If you guys remember the dance sequence where he takes the roofies trying to give to somebody else. Imagine making a film about a heroic character giving someone else a roofie. But anyway, so he takes himself and he does that dance. That was not planned or choreographed. The idea was we were going to put a body double
Wow.
in. And Keen and I were behind in what we call Video Village, with all the cameras up, 12, 13 cameras working, dance sequence. We had professional dancers. And just like a movie being a movie, when Terry began dancing, Keenan was like poking me and saying, get the other cameras pointed over there. And we did. And then all the peripheral dancers on the outside stopped dancing and they were looking down, watching him. All
Oh
the
my
crew
God.
came behind the monitor and everyone was just stunned. We did not see this coming. And then when he finished, there was a pause, like in a movie, and then huge thunderous applause. And then the rewrite started and Terry's role expanded. So
Oh
a
my
guy
God.
who already had a lot of kids, had an NFL career, but not much else going on for him, rebuilt his life and became, a megastar and has
Unbelievable.
remained just decent since Christmas Cards to Us. We did another film together called Behind the Smile with Damon, a very little small budget film. Appeared in another film that I was doing. Just a good guy.
Wow.
Wow.
That's the stuff that legends are made of.
Yeah.
And obviously when you think about Hollywood, you think about the backstory of people like Harrison Ford and things of how they got discovered and how they became who they are. I mean, this is the part of for me and maybe for Eric, you really have been a part of the filmmaking industry that had kind of transformed the industry back in, the 90s, 2000s, right? When gosh, when everything wasn't so political, you could have a good time on a movie set or watching a movie, and not think anything of it. Now it's understandable, it's different. Here's the bigger question. Do you prefer a bigger budget film or a lower budget film?
A great and difficult question. I mean, I mentioned SWAT or Murder 1600 with Wesley Snipes, Blade with Wesley. Dolores Claiborne had an enormous budget. These films are great fun, and when you're imagining your life and career, when I was in England and shooting I was there at the first wave of the music videos. I was trained originally as a director at the BBC, and then we were purloining cameras out of the BBC storage to shoot the first music videos, which then were just shot against a piece of sheet and then we would shoot the band and then send it on 3/4 inch video, if you remember that,
Wow.
to the
Yeah.
record companies, the A&R men, so they could get signed, if they could get signed. And then a guy, a producer who I knew, had this idea that maybe we should put little stories around the videos and charge the band rather than the 100 quid that we were charging now, which is £100, which is like in modern money, maybe $300. We would charge a little bit more and we do a story, and the stories got bigger and the backgrounds got bigger and
Oh,
the lights became fancier and the techniques became fancier. So flash forward, I think 2 years later, Duran 1.5 million pounds to do Girls on Film, and
wow.
everything had gotten huge. And then those guys were transferred over to commercials. And because I shot all these music videos and known ones, then I was being invited to shoot commercials with Tony Kaye and at RSA and so on, and everything sort of took off, and that led to the films. So it was curious to go from music video sets where everything go. There was never mistakes in music videos, only motif. So
Right.
I shot
Right.
a David Sylvian video intentionally, entirely out of focus. Record company hated it.
Wow.
The public loved it and won all sorts of awards. Out of focus, because when
Wow.
you put something out of focus, people kind of lean in and try to see what the images that pass the focus. It's like a dreamlike quality. You would never do that on a feature film because can you imagine experimenting with that
Oh my
radical fashion on a
God.
feature,
Yeah.
putting out of focus?
Yeah.
But once it occurred in music videos, then it happened in commercials, and then it began happening in feature films. So you need this environment where experimentation and risk taking is facilitated. I still try to
Mhm.
bring that to every set that I work on. I always say to the actors, go for it. You're not
Yeah.
going to be criticized for it. This is a nurturing, protected, safe environment for my cinematographers, for my sound recorders, for everybody. Take risks. Now, when you do big films, you get big equipment and you get all the what producers love calling toys. The reason I call them toys rather than tools is
Mm.
they can say, well, you don't need toys. And we say, well, they're tools and we want them, and then you're gonna have to pay for them. So that's why they call them toys. But you got all the toys that you want. You got all the cranes, and you got the steady cams. You've got the remote heads. You've got the repeatable motion control stuff. Great fun. I mean, it is just there's no better playground. But there's a lot of money involved. And that means there's a lot of people supervising that money. And a lot of people supervising the money want to look after their future interests. So want to make sure that if you fuck up, that you take the responsibility,
Yeah.
that you're to blame. So they make very clear that if you make a decision, they go, sharp take and take a breath. The sharp intake of breath was invented by insurance companies. So the executive can say, if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. I just don't know if it's a good idea. Now, they don't say don't do it, but they do the sharp take intake of breath. So later they said, I had a feeling that was a bad idea, and they've saved their job. When they go to hire people, are they going to hire a first-time cinematographer who shot Half-Baked, for example? No, they're going to be thinking, oh, that's a bit of a risk. We better get the old hand. Of course,
Mm.
once I became the old hand and I shot all those comedies, then every comedy that was coming through Warner Brothers or Universal or Sony, I got one of the first calls because I was the safe
Wow.
pair of hands. But with that comes this idea of being safe. Now, on independent films, on Monster, the way I lit Charlize was I put a couple of paper lanterns on the end of fish bowls. We moved the lights with her so she wouldn't have to think about hitting her marks. Never do that on a studio film at that time. We did not the famous Underworld, but another version of another film called Underworld up in Canada, where we were doing action sequences in small spaces, but I had 17 cameras set up. The studio would
Oh,
scream about that, but I wanted everything to be wholly intuitive and the action go wherever it would go. And I carried that through to my studio films. So we would take film stock and intentionally force process it, which means leaving in the chemicals longer. So the grain would get really big and nasty to create a particular look on Noah Baumbach's one of Noah Baumbach's early movies. So you can experiment in music videos. You can experiment to a lesser degree in commercials. You can experiment in independent films. When you're at the studio, you're part of the machine and experiment at your risk, hire at your risk, and make radical choices at your risk. I don't know if that makes the best films. I of the belief that it doesn't. When I was doing what's now called Last Call, which the film's called Dominion with my friend John Malkovich and Risa Fons and Rome Legere. I wrote the hell out of that script. It was meant to be a stage play. And John Malkovich read it and said, I can't do his voice. I wish I could. He
Oh, I was
goes,
hoping you would.
he said,
But I
I,
do have the entrance to his head, in in my room,
yeah, 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 yeah. And he never, people always ask about that film. But he says that he loved the script. He said he'd never seen so many words in a screenplay before. So, and then on top of that, the minute I got on set, I would say, okay, we've done two, three great takes. I'd like to do some improvisation. And I gave him each character a couple hundred pages of backstory so they have something to draw on because as a director, I feel it's my obligation to give backstory. And then John and Tony Hale and I improvised a scene talking about the nature of art and selfhood in what was meant to be a bar in Lower East Side of New York in the 1950s. And what a delightful exercise. Tony Hale, John Malkovich, me improvising.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. But again, if that was a studio film and the executives are sitting there thinking, hang on, we paid for the script and now you're improvising while the crew stands around and watches you improvise for 4.5 hours, the result was magic. That's a result
Wow.
of risk taking and being in the moment where you can do on independent films much harder on studio films.
Actually, I got a good question for that. Aside from, because I want to ask you what it's like, obviously working with and knowing John Malkovich, but what's it like for you? Do you sit in? Do you do your own editing? Do you have people come in? And what's that like when you have your set takes and then you go and you do the improvisation? How in the world do you put that together?
Well, first you got to have a super good continuity person who is sitting right next to you and taking notes on everything you do. We transcribe, whenever there's improvisation, it's transcribed and then marked up. I will, circle and square takes. I'll circle the ones that I like. I'll square the ones I think there's something of value. And then this is where it gets funny. I'll write hundreds of pages of notes because I write notes about everything. I think there's 8 different scripts that you shoot. You shoot a lighting script. So I will try to
Mm.
tell the story or create the visceral reactions in the audience entirely with lighting. I believe there's a compositional script. So I'll try to create the story and create a meaning for the audience in composition. I think there's a filter story. I think there's a music story. I think there's a production design story. And to really exercise your craft, you have to think that that's the only thing that's going to be working and make sure the entire scene works just with that element. And then you orchestrate all the elements together and pay that off. Now, I keep a record of that. It's on a chart, these 8 columns, and I give those 8 columns to the editor along with the circled and squared takes, and then 150 pages of notes as to how I want every single thing cut exactly. Um,
Wow.
and I do the same thing with the DP and the same thing with the production designer. But I also say to all my collaborators, the most important thing that you should know is I am here to inspire, not to instruct. So
Mm.
I provide that by inspiration, but then fully expect them to push back and present their own ideas within the broad framework of my vision. So Chris Gill, who was the editor on that film, um, Chris, of course, was the editor for 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, so a great editor. And I sent him all these notes in the UK, and I was in the US at the time. And he saw the notes, and I said, "Hey, did you read the notes?" He goes, "Not yet." Rang him again. "Did you read the notes?" "Not yet." I go, "Well, when are you gonna start editing?" He goes, "Oh, I've started editing." I said, "Well, what about my notes?" He said, "Stephen, uh, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Let me do a pass without your notes, just to see
Mm.
what happens." And I said, "Oh, okay, sure." I put the phone down and I turned to my partner. I said, "Right, have to find a new editor because he's not listening." Flew over to the UK and looked at the edit, and I was all nervous because I never like to fire people, but I fire people all the time, hundreds in my legendary career. And he showed me the cut, and it was brilliant.
Wow.
And he had cut out 20 of my favorite scenes, cut out all the stuff that was superfluous. And I realized at that moment, again, that the ability to delegate requires 2 things. One, hiring the right people, and two, trusting those people. As much as we want optimum control, we are not perfect in ourselves as creative artists. And what directors do is facilitate other people. I created a safe working environment so John could do his best work. And I respected Chris enough to let him do his best work. And I looked at that cut and I took notes on his cut. and then looked at my notes, and then we did a combination of the two visions, and that was the best film we could have made. Had he simply taken all my notes, we would have failed. Same thing with cast. Rome Legary, when I was doing a great scene with him and Risa, when she and Risa Films were fighting, again, heavily improvised, strongly written, I have to say, one of the best scenes I've written, but then we did a lot of improvisation based on their own experiences. And Roma had her own vision of who Dylan Thomas, who Dylan Thomas' wife should be, based on a woman's perspective. I, as a man, had written the role, but I am not a woman, as you might observe. So she pushed back. And again, I think, oh my God, she's telling me who the character is, and I wrote it. But then as I caught myself and went into my Buddhist space, that the best thing we can do is to facilitate others, I listened. And I thought, yeah, some of these notions are really good. And how clever am I to have cast her? And how clever am I to take these notes? And how clever am I then to facilitate the combination of her vision with mine? And the scene became the best scene I've directed. And the book, which you mentioned, and we'll get to later, I know, but it's the same thing, which is the processes I was taught to write things in a very structured fashion, to particularly in screenplays, to have the inciting incident and the page 50 turn. All that stuff is complete and utter nonsense until you free yourself of those orthodoxies. And in a way, I improvise with myself. I freed myself of the rules of that other director, which is what the standards were of the industry. That standard of the three acts, supposedly taken from Aristotle, is what has destroyed 90% of all films. 90% of films fail, and nearly 100% of films follow the three acts. Now, if you were to do an experiment that failed 90% of the time, would you start to think, maybe I should change the
Maybe change it a
experiment?
little.
you
Right,
know,
right, yeah.
but nobody does because, again, this fear-based studio culture where if you do something different from the norm, you're going to have to carry that on your back if it fails. If
Mm,
you do something that fails, that hires all the usual people and follows all the norms, you're safe because you're doing what everybody else does. So for my writing process, when I rejected the idea of the three acts of structure, I gave up outlines completely, and I just dictated the characters speaking as if they were having a conversation with themselves. It was liberating and created the best thing I've ever written in the book. And the screenplay from the book is one of the best screenplays I've written because I rejected the standard orthodoxy, because I gave myself the same advice that Chris gave to me, which was let's not look at the instruction, let's look at the intuition and see where it takes us. And I recommend that to every young writer now, which is no writer's block if you don't have to write to form.
right,
It
right.
sounds like you think more along the lines of freeform jazz than like
Mm,
classical music, because with
mm.
freeform jazz, it's not the notes you're playing, the notes you're not playing, and it's much more experimental as
Eric,
opposed
you're,
to.
you're exactly. It's exactly like jazz. It's exactly like jazz, but um, it's like jazz. You know how sometimes when there's a jazz improvisation going on, the musicians start hearing each other and then find a through line and
Yeah,
then run with it and acquires a
yep,
Yeah.
structure.
yep.
That's what happens with me as I begin in the wildest kind of freeform jazz or atonalism almost, and then end up with something ordered and structured. I always finish with story and structure and order, but I don't begin there. I have to discover the characters. When I say to my writing students or I mentor people, tell me your film. They can go on for hours about their story. Well, story is a mechanism to discover character. We don't wake up in the morning saying, I wonder what stories we're going to hear today. We think instead, I wonder what people I'm going to meet and
Mm.
what makes those people tick. And then we hear their stories, and the stories leads us to character, but the end is character, not story. So when these kids say to me they know their story, I go, great. Now tell me about your character. Maybe three sentences. So
Wow.
imagine creating art where you know your character so little you can't get back three sentences, but you know all the mechanisms of story. What you end up with is the cliche structure over and over again. Everyone's telling the same story, but when you have someone like Mike Leigh, for example, or other real innovators like Charlie Kaufman, then you end up with these really complex characters. Now they're compelling. Whatever the story is around compelling characters, we want to hear it. And that's
Mm,
what's revolutionary, I guess, about my approach, about the approach of others, in that, and Chris Gill and other creative artists I've worked with, free yourself of the regulation and limits of the orthodoxies and do something different. That's what we're obliged to do as artists.
I like
I
that.
want to make one comment and then another example connecting to music. I remember I was watching CBS this morning and they were interviewing Andrew Lloyd Webber. I'm sure we could all agree one of the greatest, musical writers of all time. And he said this thing, if you told me to write a love song, I couldn't do it. But if you told me to write a love song about a girl who's moved to New York from a small town to accomplish her dream and then met this guy who she falls madly in love with, that song I could write. And then the example I always like to use whenever people, so I remember someone told me once, we were talking about filmmaking. I have this great idea for a chase scene, not the movie, not the characters. And I always think if Porkins would have blown up the Death Star instead of Luke, no one would care. We care that the Death Star blew up because we saw Luke go from
The
being this
character.
farm
Yeah.
boy to growing throughout the whole movie. It's his character that we're so excited about. So, yeah,
You Beautifully expressed, exactly. So you could tell that same story with anybody, but
yeah,
the
Right.
story wouldn't matter. What we're interested in is the complexity of character, the insuperable obstacles, and the most insuperable obstacle is the self. If we show a complex character like Sally Hawkins in Happy Go Lucky, and we can't figure her out, we don't stop watching until we do, and that's what draws us in. It's my expression I use most often is that all films are mysteries. Comedies are mysteries, dramas mysteries, action mysteries. No matter what you do, it's a mystery. It's a mystery of character. You want to discover how characters will behave in different circumstances, and if a character is oblique or complex, you want to understand why that character behaves the way they do. That's the mystery that compels us and drives us. In our ordinary life, we meet people every day. We're compelled to try to understand who they are. We don't want to hear their stories. We want to know their natures. Sometimes story
exactly.
reveals nature, sometimes it doesn't. So don't think story is the be all and end all. It's simply a mechanism we use. Rothko is a great painter. When you look at a Rothko painter, you can be moved and affected and altered, but there's no story there. I mean, if you're one of the people who believes in ideologically, like a religious zealot, you'll try to say, "Oh, well, let me tell you about Rothko's background and the paintings." Come on. If you
Yeah.
look at a piece of art, it's got to exist independent of your knowledge of the painter. So you look at a painting, a couple of lines on canvas, it affects you. Why? No story, but something about the color combination, the frame itself. That's what moves you. So that's what I'm compelled and interested by.
Like with
Man,
me,
that's fascinating.
when I start writing, my scripts, I'll get, the log line, but then I focus on my characters. I do mini bios about my characters, stuff that will never be in the script, but I have to know it when I mean, I'll even go what playlist they listen to. But then the top, I got to add to that, one of my biggest joys was when we were making Hillsborough Road. One of the actresses said, "Yeah, my character wouldn't do that." And that I love, when it's that
When
merging
they
of
when they own
your,
their character. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's not
Yeah.
that, you let the inmates run the asylum, but it's, there's that shared vision of where this character's going that makes the magic of storytelling happen.
hmm Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really goes back to the trust, right? You trust the actor, you trust the people that you're working with to understand, because I think once you start working with people, um, and a lot, everybody that you've worked with, you've gained this trust. And has that carried over to your trust in being a director? And knowing, because obviously when people work in the industry for a long time, you can either trust them or you never want to work with them again, and you get a good feeling, right? um and but early on, when you were a cinematographer, director of photography, what kind of things did you pick up from that And then what did you bring over into your not only your writing, but your directing style?
Yeah, I got to say that you're in a position of great privilege when you're a cinematographer because you get to watch directors succeed or fail, producers succeed or fail, writers succeed or fail, right up close. And you're helping them hopefully succeed, but you're also observing their methodologies. And Ridley Scott, you look at, of course, Jon Favreau, I worked with, you worked, Mike Lee, who I mentioned. Uh, so many others, Patty Jenkins, of course, Tony Kaye. I mean, the list, a lot of great directors along the way. And I observed what they did. And what I discovered, and I've just written another book called The Book of Ten, which is coming out soon, about what I learned from all these different people. But one of the main things is the nature of leadership. I think a director, more than anything else, is a good leader. So it's not as sexy as being that sort of martinet yelling at everybody and you know exactly what you want and everyone else is ignorant. But that isn't the best way to lead. First, you want to facilitate and protect. You want people to know that they're safe to take risks. You want to encourage them to take risks. You want to have a vision in some detail, but you want your vision to have a plasticity so that when others contribute, as you encourage them to contribute, it can be altered. You want to give recognition to people because a very simple human thing is to be recognized. So when a production designer or a DP or a support actor does something great, recognize it loudly and publicly. When people get things wrong, you don't have to humiliate or punish them. You can say that it doesn't fit within your vision, and you've got to be religiously honest. A director can never tell even the slightest lie. You can't even say, great, now we're going to do another take. Now, if it's not great, then you got to say it's not great. If you're saying great and we're going to do another take, you're basically saying, I'm lying to you. Once you lie to an actor, however well-intended that lie is, once you lie to a crew member, they'll never believe you again because they know you're capable of the thing that you can't do, which is lie. So when an actor doesn't hit it, I'll say it's not working. Now, the other thing that binds us together is our vulnerabilities, not our core competencies. The mistakes that films like Marvel films make is that you think that, or big suggest that audiences think that they want competent superheroes in their lives. And maybe when they're 14, they do. And these films are enjoyable. And I've worked on a Marvel film, so I get it. But really, what draws us to each other is vulnerability. So the first thing I say on every set I get on is there's a lot of things I'm worried about. There's a lot of skill sets I don't have. There's a lot of things I'm uncertain about, and I'm going to need everyone's help on this because I might mess it up. And when I do mess it up, I say it loud and I say it often. I screwed it up. That was a bad note I gave you. I did something wrong. I created this, the wrong atmosphere, the shots from the wrong angle. I subverted the actor here. And I'll say that. And when they know I'm vulnerable, they can be vulnerable. When they know I'm honest, they can be honest. So the communication is absolutely honest. We're all about our vulnerabilities and our weaknesses. And the set's hugely safe, entirely safe. And yet people can take huge risks in the safety of that, knowing that they won't be humiliated from what would perceive in the outside world as failure. To us, it's just experimentation. So it's a methodology, and it's what every director should do. And of course, the thing that destroys most creativity is fear. So when it's a first-time director, a young director, an experienced director, director first time working on a studio film, their fear moves them away from those core principles, and they'll yell and they'll shout and they'll blame and they'll not take responsibility when they should. They'll punish all the things that ultimately subvert good filmmaking.
My goodness gracious, what a conversation. What came first? Did you want to be a writer or a filmmaker first?
I was trained as a writer, and the BBC hired me to write. So I got the classic TV training at the BBC, which is great. And
Awesome.
then my world was turned upside down. I was shooting music videos. And I was thinking, hey, there's nobody speaking. This is all visual storytelling. All right, I'm now going to be a cinematographer. Hold on. What's the difference between cinematography and writing? They're both languages. They
Hmm.
just encode ideas differently. In writing, we use tropes and memes and expressions, and a person has exposition, they speak. In cinematography, we use composition, camera movement. the lens, we use the DI, we use lighting, all these things in concert to create a more enigmatic idea that is difficult to clearly define, but it still exists. When you look at an image of a guy on a cliff face and he's in silhouette and the sky is orange, and his face is expressionless, and the camera cranes down onto his back, not his face, but the back, and we just slightly rotate around to a profile shot. Is that a happy person? Or is there something going on within him which we can't access but still engages us? We communicated that big idea with lighting, camera movement, and composition. That's a language. It just encodes ideas differently. So for me, the combination of being trained as a writer, then as a cinematographer, then looking at editing and all these other things, I realized that our job as directors is to know all these languages and connect them together to engage the audience in the experience of film, of which story is one of those elements, but only one.
I
Right.
love that.
So it's like, I'm
I
sorry, Larry, go on.
oh no, go ahead, go ahead.
Directing to me was always more like conducting an orchestra, because you got to know enough about everything to be a good conductor. You don't need to be a master at the string section, but you got to know the string section. And then I want to ask you this. Do you think that since music videos no longer exist, it's hurting directing? Because you look through at some of our biggest directors, like David Fincher started off doing, I mean, propaganda films, put out so many great people. Michael Bay, whatever you say about him, the guy's an auteur. You got to give the man his credit. And,
Yeah.
David Finch, there are people today who still want to see the movie from Jamie's Got a Gun.
Yeah. I gotta say, it's a good point. I think that art requires experimentation and radical choices. And it's, as you rightly say, Eric, it's very difficult once you're doing features to experiment because you'll get punished and you don't have time or money. So it was a great training ground or laboratory for experimentation. And the fact that it's diminished now means that fewer people can experiment. Now, of course, we've changed from film to video, and people can buy a professional camera, or they can buy a Red. I'm sorry, they can buy they can buy other cameras, but and they're not expensive anymore. So people can shoot films much less expensively than we could shoot music videos before. You do a whole film probably for what some music videos cost. So it does allow you to experiment in that way. It's just that if you then get investors and try to get it to the market, since Sundance, which had 7,000 films submitted this year, you may not find an audience as you would like, but you still get a chance to experiment. What I say to every young writer, every young filmmaker is do your craft. It doesn't cost much anymore. I write every single day of my life, every single day, whether I'm inspired or not, because I've got to exercise that muscle. I do film ideas. I shoot something with my phone every single day. Again, I've got to exercise that muscle. Doesn't mean that what I do is meant for general consumption, but I experiment and discover things. I'm doing a one-man show now, which is based on my producing of GRQ and the book GRQ. And the books have this huge success. So people said, well, how did the book come to be? How'd the film come from the book? And I thought, I told the story so many times, said, you know what? I'll make a film about the making
Brilliant.
of the book, the making of the film. But
Yeah.
there's more than one Steve Bernstein. There's Steve Bernstein, the producer, Steve Bernstein, the director, Steve Bernstein, the writer, Steve Bernstein, the artist, Steve Bernstein, the businessman, and they all dislike each other. So I said, what if I put them all on stage at the same time? So I then began experimenting, and we shot something last week with a locked off camera, and then four versions of myself, all arguing with each other. And that's going to become the one man show. It's going to be the making of GRQ the book and the making of GRQ the film. And I should also say in the book, GRQ, Steve Bernstein, the filmmaker, appears halfway through the book as the antagonist who's about to release a film about crypto. This character in the book has put all his money into crypto, and he's got no money left. He's going to lose his house. His wife doesn't know. She's suspicious. There's earthquakes going on. Everything's going wrong. And someone convinces him to invest in a crypto coin that's tied to a movie. The movie's called GRQ and directed by Steve Bernstein. And when Steve Bernstein announces that film, they figure crypto coin's going to go through the roof, and he's going to get all the money to pay for his house. Now, what's Steve Bernstein's film about? It's about a guy who invests in crypto called GRQ, and he's putting all his money on the coin in the hopes that a guy named, hold on, Steve Bernstein, and on it goes. So it's a meta within a meta within a meta within a meta.
Wow.
And of course, I appear in the film, but not as myself. I appear in my film as a priest. I've got someone else playing me and announcing it. So it's anarchic and it's wild, but it's just natural that the one man show is engendered out of this because they all tie together. And then we got a blockchain company that's going to be doing a treasure hunt based on the book and the film and this one man show, each with a clue, and clues are going to be everywhere. And the prize is $250,000 piece of jewelry that's in the movie. So
Oh,
that piece of jewelry will
Wow.
be available for the people that solve, if anyone solves, the treasure hunt. So all these things are tied together. I guess if there's a message to all this, is my experience of writing GRQ is about the process of creative liberation. My experience of directing GRQ and my other films is about creative liberation, which is embracing the chaos and not believing in any particular orthodoxies, being wholly in the moment, facilitating others, and seeing what you produce. That's creative freedom, which studios don't always engender because they're frightened about money, which is fair enough. But for you, the filmmakers listening, the writers listening, be radical. The worst that can happen is you develop some new ideas about your craft, and there's nothing wrong with that, even if it doesn't generate money in the short term.
Wow. I
wow.
think that's a good place to kind of, because honestly, we had you for 45 minutes. We're kind of running over. I
I
absolutely
talk too much. I'm so sorry, guys.
No, it was amazing.
no.
It felt like I was learning back in film school, but paying attention to them.
This, the knowledge that you have, because you also teach, right? And you've done a lot of stuff, I think, in Greece. I was reading in a
Yeah.
bio, right?
Yeah, we rebuilt their film industry there, and we created the tax credit, and we brought $1 billion worth of business to Greece. So yeah.
Wow.
Wait a minute. You did it because I went to Greece a couple years ago.
Just did
We
a
were we
documentary.
were yeah, we were shooting a documentary, and before and before we went, like, I was talking to the producer, and she was like, "Oh, we have to go if we're going to shoot any kind of like ancient Grecian places, you have to first get permission, and I think you had to do a payment and all that. That was you?
Yeah, well, I got rid of all that stuff. So
Oh,
the idea was that people were
oh,
so reluctant to come to Greece because
that,
if you
yeah.
went to ancient, you have to go to the Ministry of Agriculture of
Yes.
Archaeology,
Yeah.
and they would say no. You then had to go to the Ministry of Culture, and they would say no, and then
Yeah.
ICOMOS, which was the film office, and they would say no. And what I did was say, guys, they had asked me, George Hazimarkis, who was the governor of the South Aegean, said, "What could you do to bring film to Greece?" And so I'll tell you what. First of all, got to have the most competitive tax credit in the world. So we had a 40% tax incentive, which is
Wow.
still there. You need to build some film studios. They've built three. You need to have a continuing film education. I ran a 6-day intensive course and helped some schools set up there. And you need to have local production managers who will help the local crew shadows the foreign crews and train them.
Wow.
And you need to get rid of all the red tape and paperwork so that when people go to shoot a location, they have a one-stop shop. We did all those things, and we went from virtually no business to over $1 billion worth of business
Oh,
in the last few years. So it was a big change for Greece, and believe me, anyone sets up a tax incentive benefits. Georgia is having a great time right now. New
Yeah.
Mexico, the UK now has a 40% tax credit. Ireland, Canada. It's just good business. Politicians will fight against it, saying it's a giveaway for those rich film people. But what happens is it stimulates local infrastructure because you've got to use hotels and cabs and
Yep.
equipment and carpenters. It's great publicity. Tourism, which is already great in Greece, increased like 15% as a result of all these films. Um, Local people get trained in a new skill set. Once you have the skill set, it attracts additional business. It was
Yeah.
just a good thing to do, and very proud that we did it. It nearly broke us. I mean, it was hard work, and Greek politics are nearly as complicated, in fact, more complicated than American politics. But and we had to get things passed through the parliament there, which was not easy. But it was again, would I choose to do it if I could do it again? Probably not, because it was so difficult. but did it make me a better person from all that I learned about human nature and about politics and Greek culture and for a great country that I love? I'm glad that I did.
Man,
Oh,
I think that it almost is like the theme is for every creative person, because when you go into something you never know what's going to happen, then you go through it and all hell breaks loose, a storm and this, and then you come out of it and then you're like, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah,
Maybe,
that's
right?
right.
And I think the theme of this podcast is you are and really, and I mean this, Stephen, you are um you are a person of high intellect and creativity, because I think how you approach your creative life is fascinating. And I think I would consider you an auteur because of the way that you speak about film and talk about shooting and directing and how you run your set. And I think, man, oh man, and I hate to ask this, do you can people contact you for any type of any type of consultant, high paying consultant?
They surely try. Here's what. First of all, thank you for the kind words, and also I think because we're all filmmakers that we three connect, and I'm sure all the experience I've had are the same ones as director that Eric has had. So directors have the same basic philosophy. I was just cognizant of the time, so I probably talked too fast and didn't let Eric
Oh,
get
it's
words in.
beautiful.
So forgive me for that. But in terms of contacting me, yeah, I consult all the time. I write. I've gotten two film commissions or screenplay commissions in the last year just by people contacting me via Instagram and saying, "Would you write the screenplay?" And my agents always say no. And then because people reach me directly, I'll then read the germ of their ideas. Please, anyone listening, don't send me a script. As a WGA writer, I'm not allowed to read scripts
Thank
because
you.
then if inadvertently something that resembles your script appears in one of mine, it gets very, very complicated.
Yep.
But ideas, someone writing screenplays for people, that's my stock. That's what I do most of the time. I write 4 or 5 screenplays a year. So I'm doing that when I'm not directing and not writing books. So I do that. So I'm always interested in people with those ideas. Look,
Okay.
you guys know I've got an Instagram page, Steve Bernstein, director writer, which I'm sure you'll put a link to. But if you look at
Yes.
that, you realize that I'm not in this just for the money. Every day I curate that and I will either be talking about writing or directing or art or finding really interesting pieces that other people have done that are related to film and to the artistic process. So I do that for free. I've got a
Wow.
podcast you guys mentioned, Filmmaker and Fans. Vince Grimes, who's the former creative director of Google, he and I have done that every single week for over a year now, free.
Wow.
Not even
wow.
sponsors. We just do
Yeah.
it for free.
Yeah.
So if anyone doubts my good intentions, I've had a privileged career. I mean, great suffering as well, I must say, and terrible catastrophes and disasters, personal and otherwise. But my best moments have been from the kindness and generosity of others.
Mhm.
And I feel spiritually, emotionally, religiously that my obligation now at my time in life is to provide to others what was provided to me.
Wow.
So that's what I'm trying to do. And when I get notes from young filmmakers via Instagram who I helped a year ago, and one guy in particular is now doing a feature film, when the people in Greece who were in desperate shape and there was no film industry there, when they write to me and say that I've changed their lives and changed the industry there, no matter how much money we make on a movie, honestly, and this sounds like an old man talking, but nothing compares to people being grateful for you altering the course of their lives. It's kind of magnificent. Greece in particular, you should see what's going on there, the studios they built there and everything else. And I'm thinking, had I not gone to Greece and bumped into George Hatzimarkis, had I not, as you guys know by now, talked too much and said, this is what you should do, those things would not have happened. Those lives would not have been changed. Had I not worked with Patty Jenkins, first-time director, who was, working with an experienced DP, I'm not sure, as brilliant as Patty is, and she's brilliant, that film would have been made. Jon Favreau, who I think I shot the first things he ever directed. If I had not been nurturing to John, it doesn't mean that John isn't smarter and more gifted and remarkable than I am. He's a remarkable person, but I still think I probably helped him along the way. Water for Chocolate. I'm not sure Alfonso had directed a film before, but I helped him on the way. So I look back on those things, and yeah, I bought a lot of things I shouldn't have bought. Got some nice houses, all the rest of it. Does that give me the same satisfaction as looking on all the lives I've touched and changed? No. And
Wow.
to Eric's first point, uh, I'm actually very proud of Half Baked and Waterboy and White Chicks because say what you want about art films, about death and existentialism and all the rest of it. When you make people laugh and bring joy to lives, you've done a great service. And I gotta say, White Chicks has reached a lot of people, and we've made a lot of lives better, if not for eternity, at least for a couple of hours.
I love it.
And
I love it.
the one scene of it's become a huge TikTok trend right now.
Which one?
The scene where they're at the wait and for the lady, perhaps a salad. And then, she goes on to order this big meal. There's a bunch of people doing that now on TikTok.
Yeah, it's Sean, isn't it? And with Terry, yeah. And he's like she's trying to put him off, and he just keeps ordering more and more and more and more food. So it was Marlon, sorry, not Sean, but it was fantastic. So yeah, it was magical. Yeah, a great experience and great people. The Wayans, some of Keenan is one of the most decent, brilliant people there is. Just treated me like a king for all those years. We did all those films we did together. We did The Little Man together as well. Some
Mm.
commercials, a long and very successful relationship. Adam Sandler, another great guy. Waterboy was just a great experience. It's been a good career. It's not over yet, guys. Wait till the one man
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah,
Well,
but I'll be happy to come back. We'll talk some more. Please,
Yes.
the book right now is like a phenomena. It's like selling like mad. So we want to lean into that. So if you guys
Yeah.
can post something that links people to Amazon, please
oh,
do
of
that
course, of
because
course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And where else can you get it? Amazon and
it's a Barnes and Noble,
everywhere.
Waterson's abroad. It's available everywhere. We thought the book was going to be like a little off the record, whatever. There's a little auxiliary thing to the film, and then maybe we'd sell a few hundred books. It won this literary award. It's up for another literary award. It's selling like thousands of copies. It's going nuts, and it's really weird in life. And Eric, you'll get this as well as the director where you do something and you think, oh, well, that probably won't do that well. And suddenly, for no reason, just takes off. And you're thinking,
Hmm.
what just happened? That's what's going on with the book right now. And the reviews of all 5 stars on
Nice.
Amazon. I had no idea that was going to happen. So it's a ride that I'm enjoying, but entirely unanticipated. So
I
do what you
love it.
can.
Well,
I love it. I love it. Thank you. From my end, before we wrap up, thank you so much. We will have you back on. Let's do lunch with you, and we'll even get you guys back on, you and your podcast buddy, to talk about podcasting and
Happy to.
everything. I think this is the point, is you start out as a filmmaker and you see where it takes you, and you just
yeah.
say yes. You just say yes to the experience. You doesn't have to be crazy yes, but it's just yes, I'll work with you. Yes, I'll work with you. Yes, I'll help you. Yes, I'll do this. And it just that synergy. So thank you for saying yes to coming on the show.
Well, I appreciate it. I feel I talk too much, guys, because I do. When you wind me up, I'm like a little toy. So
I
forgive
love
me
it.
if I
Me
stepped on
too.
you, but
No.
next time will be a more balanced conversation because I really enjoyed speaking, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, Stephen, we just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. All of his links will be listed if you're listening in over on Anchor. And when the show goes up, we will make sure to go, at him in all of our social media. Stephen, thank you so much for coming by. And like we've been saying every episode this year, seriously remember, support New Life Village.